Happy Thursday evening, everyone. Hope you're doing well. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That's Andrew Ellis. This is Talking Stuff, the Ohio State recruiting podcast presented by The Podcast. It's been another busy week at Ohio State. We're trying to jam in this episode of the podcast on a Thursday evening just because there's so much happening and so much more to come at Ohio State this weekend with 11 more official visitors. Father's Day weekend. Ohio State obviously losing its on-campus recruiting coordinator with Aaron Dunston leaving this week for Michigan, which we can talk a little bit about that if necessary. I'm not sure it's all that pertinent, especially considering the crux, the majority of her job was done for the month. Certainly it puts Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni and those guys in a little bit of a pickle heading into the final official visit weekend of the June calendar, which will be the June 21st weekend. But again, most of that stuff is done, and so now it's just divvying up some responsibilities while Ryan Day and Mark Pantoni figure out who's going to take over for Aaron Dunston, who did a great job for the last 3 years at Ohio State, but wanted to get out of recruiting, and Michigan gave her the opportunity to get into football operations. Certainly one of those things where the timing is not great for Ohio State. I don't think anyone will dispute that, Andrew, but it is also a situation where you can't really do much about it because Sherrone Moore and Michigan could have been nice, I guess, and said, "Hey, wait 2 weeks," but that's not their responsibility. Certainly not their aim. If they feel like they can take a jab shot at Ohio State, they're going to do it. Either way, I have nothing but great things to say about Erin, and she's been awesome to me. She's been great getting to know over the next couple of years. And she's getting married next month, so she's going to take a little time off after that anyway. But the opportunity for Michigan to, as I said, take a jab, it feels like one Sherrone Moore was like, you need to accept this job today or you're not going to get it. And, it's hard to blame people. I think one thing people don't understand is that for the vast majority of people in college athletics, jobs are very transitory. Like they are not beholden to where they are. They're not loyalists. They are looking to advance their careers, and you can't blame someone for doing that. So that is what it is.
Yeah, I think multiple things can be true with this whole situation. Like, I think she was absolutely damn good at her job. The players clearly loved her. We saw some of the social media activity when it was announced that she was leaving. But if she wants to get out of recruiting and she's now getting into operations, this is, I guess, the right move for her, a promotion. But I also think the Michigan side is trying to spin this as some major, huge win that it's probably really not quite as important as they're making it out to be. So best wishes to her, though. Seriously.
Yeah. The timing is more of like an annoyance than anything else. It's not something that is going to derail what Ohio State is working on in the month of June, as I said, because the majority of the work is done at this point. Now it's just figuring out who picks up the slack for the next 10 days, which is not a big deal because in June, these guys are working 20-hour days basically anyway, and that's what it is. They're still having success on the recruiting trail. They landed Fahim Delane in the class of 2025 on Sunday, commitment number 14 for Ohio State. We talked about it in Snap Judgments on Tuesday as we had a chance to really break things down, but I think the biggest takeaway for me with Fahim Delane here is that everything that he sort of said he wanted to do in this process, he did. And he told Ohio State when he knew where he wanted to go, he was going to commit. And there was a lot of speculation over the last year that he was likely to choose Ohio State. But obviously, if he was ever comfortable enough to make that decision, he would have. And then last weekend, with the family in tow in Columbus with him, he shuts down his recruitment, not visiting Oregon this weekend or next weekend, not visiting LSU this weekend. Commitment number 3 at safety with Deshaun Stewart and Cody Haddad in the class. Deshaun Stewart, who, by the way, I was talking to the head principals of South Florida Express the last couple of days at Ohio State, and they raved about Deshaun Stewart, by the way, and how he played for them. So maybe a guy that maybe does not get talked about nearly enough, but they loved what he did for them. And he certainly is a stock up type of dude. But as Fahim Delane enters the class, Ohio State, 3 safeties, still probably looking at one more. We'll talk about that later if you want. what else from the last weekend of the second official visit weekend of June was the big takeaway for you?
Sticking with the Fahim Delane thing real quick, though, heading into last weekend when we talked about, the visitors that were coming in, I think that was the name we kind of circled as that was the big fish you would like to see them reel in after the weekend or during the weekend. And getting him on board is, immense for many reasons. But, besides him, I think it seems like Quincy Porter is rising up the wide receiver board for Ohio State. It sure seems like it's a Michigan-Ohio State battle. He's expected to be in Ann Arbor for his official visit this weekend. Getting him on campus was big. He's one of those kids, as we've talked about before, doesn't say a whole lot. So it's just kind of one of those things where you don't see many updates. You just kind of trust Brian Hartline, I guess. So that was a pretty big deal. And then Damian Shanklin, I could be wrong, and I'll ask you your opinion on this, but there had been so much LSU buzz for the defensive end out of Indiana. I was kind of waiting to see if this trip to Ohio State, the dreaded dream school, if that LSU buzz would kind of subside and maybe we'd start hearing more and more about Ohio State coming out of this past weekend. And that has not happened at all. So I wonder if that's a sign that we can, scratch him from any tentative mock class list that we've started to put together.
Yeah, heading out of the weekend, I would probably still have him out or have him out of the class at this point. And it's not necessarily because Ohio State doesn't like him or he doesn't like Ohio State, but there's whatever he's looking for. LSU did a great job of selling it. Ohio State has 2 defensive ends committed. They're still chasing a number of them, including Zion Grady from Alabama, and who will visit on the weekend of the 21st. And I just think that maybe it's a situation where Brian Kelly, the work that he had done in Indiana, kind of knows how to win that fight. And that Ohio State, while they like what they have seen from Damian Shanklin, has not really been able to build a great relationship with him. He's only visited the 2 times. It just doesn't seem like it's something that has taken a step to the next level, which is what normally happens on official visits. But it does come down to the fact that you can't get a commitment from every player. There's only going to be 25 or 26 guys in the class, and you can't get everyone. So when you have London Merritt, you have Zahir Mathis, who will take his official visit to Ohio State in the fall. You have Zion Grady you're still going after. You have other players at defensive end that you're still recruiting. I just think that you're in a situation where you can not feel rushed if you're Ohio State, and maybe LSU put a little bit more pressure on. Who knows? But there's still 2 months until he makes a decision. So a lot of things can shake out. As of today, I'd probably have LSU still as the favorite, since Ohio State was viewed as the favorite for the last couple months. But I do think Ohio State is the prohibitive favorite right now for Quincy Porter. As we record this on Thursday night, the expectation in Ann Arbor is that he still arrives for his official visit. I don't know if that's going to happen. I've heard conflicting things throughout the day on Thursday. Until he shows up or doesn't show up, I don't think anyone's going to know for sure. But the expectation is certainly that he will still be there. I don't know what Michigan can sell him on that Ohio State doesn't have, other than the length of the relationship that Ron Bellamy, the wide receivers coach at Michigan, has had with him versus the length of the relationship Brian Hartline's had. I don't know that there's any other scenario where if you stack them up side by side, Michigan wins the battle. So I think that it's a uphill fight for the Wolverines if they get him on campus, and I think Ohio State will win that.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But
he did say he has a July 14th decision date, tentatively set. That's his father's birthday. That's the intended plan. So we'll see if it gets there.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see what happens this weekend. But yeah, just switching back over to the offensive line, just recapping last weekend. 3 offensive linemen on campus. I think you got kind of an interesting mix. You got a tackle, you got a couple interior guys. Jackson Lloyd, the tackle that they're looking at, seems like it's maybe Alabama and USC. And then you've got Andrew Stargell, center prospect, and then Javon McFadden, the kid from the East Coast. I was kind of thinking that there could be some, I think last week heading into the weekend, I said 2.5 was kind of the number that I was setting the over under at for commitments. And I
don't know why you do that. I told you not to do those things, but you do.
I know. Anyway. I know I'm very silly. But I thought one of those offensive linemen might be one of the ones that would pop. But then coming out of the weekend, I think things might be heading in a bit of a different direction along the offensive line, specifically the interior part of the line.
Yeah, Ohio State feels very good about where things are with Jackson Lloyd. Now we'll see how that plays out when he heads to Alabama this weekend. I don't truly believe that USC, I think USC is running probably a distant third there between Ohio State and Alabama. Heading out of the visit in Columbus, I think Ohio State has put themselves in the winning position, but that's what you do on official visits week. So if you're not in the winning position, that generally means you're never going to win. We'll see what they can do different or what Alabama does. The thing is with Alabama, Kalen DeBoer and his coaching staff were recruiting Lloyd for a long time when they were at Washington. So that's again where they're really pushing what advantage they have. And with Andrew Stargell, he still wants to take visits to, I believe it was North Carolina State and Kentucky. And I don't think it's a situation where there was an ultimatum or anything like that, or even the thought of an ultimatum from Ohio State's perspective. But I think it was hey, if you're not going to come in and commit right away, then we'll be more than willing to look elsewhere. And the elsewhere, I firmly believe, is going to be Jake Cook from Westerville North High School outside of Columbus. He camped at Ohio State on June 5th, was really, really good. We talked about that a lot last week. He came back on Wednesday, was there on June the 12th, did about an hour-long private workout with Justin Fry, with Mike Soleni, with Tim Drevno. So the entire offensive line brain trust for Ohio State did about 45 minutes of center-specific drills where he was working on snapping and getting upfield, a lot of the stuff that you have to do. Jake played center as a freshman at Westerville North, has not played there the last 2 years, but will play there this year. I was told he's probably going to play all over the line. He did not get offered by Ohio State on Wednesday, and I think because of that, some people are under the impression that it's not going to happen, and I am not one of those people. I firmly believe he is going to be offered by Ohio State. I don't know if it will be this week. I don't know if it'll be next week. I know that after talking to people on Wednesday in Columbus, talking to people on Thursday in Columbus, I really believe that offer is coming. It may not be on a timeline that maybe Jake had expected heading into the second trip to Columbus or second trip to Ohio State on Wednesday. Maybe he'll get annoyed and slough them off, but I just don't see that happening. This opportunity for Jake Cook is the one he's dreamt of his entire life. If the Buckeyes offer, if it takes 2 more weeks for them to evaluate everything and get through official visits before Ryan Day and Justin Fry really sit down and go over the tape from Wednesday's workout, so what? I think, but I do believe that he will be offered by Ohio State. And at this point, between Jake Cook and Andrew Stargell and Caden Strayhorn, who are the 3 center targets now in the class of 2025, I don't know how to do odds. I don't know how to make odds, but I'd put the odds at a lot, 5 to 4 that Jake Cook ends up in the class. Is that good odds or bad odds?
I think I forget how odds work too, but I think you did it right. But yes, I'm with you on that. If you're looking at those 3 guys, I think Strayhorn's visiting Michigan this week, and I think the expectation is he's probably going to end up there. But it seems like Jake Cook is a safe bet. I'm not going to lie. I kind of thought he was going to be offered on Wednesday when he was at camp. Not that I was there to watch him or anything. I just thought that might happen. And I thought there could be a quick turnaround from that. But one thing I did find interesting was it seemed right after that hour-long session with Justin Fry or whatever, he's on social media recruiting guys to Louisville. So when I saw that, I was like, damn, maybe the visit didn't or the workout didn't go as planned. But like you said, it's probably just a matter of Ohio State getting together, watching the tape from last week, and then maybe that offer does come this coming week or in a month from now or whenever. But it does seem likely at this point.
Yeah, I would have him as certainly the most likely of those guys to be in the class at this point. And I hope it's what happens. I don't generally get personally invested in these stories, but I think that Jake Cook has earned it. I do not believe, and I'll say this as plainly as I can, if Ohio State was not intending to offer him at some point, I do not think that they would have asked him to come back on Wednesday for that extra workout. If you look at the way things transpired with Nolan Davenport, for example, at Massillon, Washington, he camped on the same day as Jake Cook a week ago, and the next day committed to Wisconsin. Like I think that the conversation after that camp was obviously different between the two. And so I think that I do think that will come for Jake at some point. And I know that a lot of people are rooting for him. And, I think he's told me that he really appreciates that. And so, if it does happen, I hope people celebrate it the way they should, because right now he's the number 9 ranked guard in the country, according to rivals.com. The way that he has changed himself in the last year and a half is insane. It's crazy. And he's worked his butt off. And, his coaching staff at Westerville North includes Stanley Jackson, Winfield Garnett, Reggie Germany, Beanie Wells. Like, it is an Ohio State staff. So there's a lot of guys there pushing to get that to happen for him. So I think it will happen, just maybe not on the timeline that everyone thought with that extra workout happening. Ohio State camp this week, as we talked about, they had a 1-day camp on Tuesday. They had a 7-on-7 camp on Wednesday. And then they had another 1-day recruiting camp today, Thursday, where I was at all 3 of those camps. It was a busy week, a lot of offers, a lot of good stories. Thursday specifically may have been the best offensive line group I've ever seen at an Ohio State camp, including the country's number 1 ranked offensive lineman in the class of 2026, Emmanuel Iheanacho from Maryland. We saw Drew Evers from Texas come into town, get an offer on Wednesday night. Camp on Thursday was very, very good. Felix Ojo from Texas, another guy, 6'7", 300 pounds. He camped on Thursday, earned an offer. Nick Scruggs from Virginia, very, very good. We saw Sam Greer working out at Ohio State. He said he kind of tweaked his hip in an early part of the day, and so I don't think he was his full self, but really looks the part of an offensive tackle. And we talked about the 2026 offensive line recruiting a couple weeks ago, but I'm more and more convinced that like that class is setting up on a tee for Justin Fry. So I think he has to just get through the 2025 cycle, and the Buckeyes need to obviously beat Michigan this year and have that staff retained. But I think that it's setting up in a great way for Ohio State in 2026. And there was a lot of those dudes on campus on Thursday. It was an interesting week as far as quarterbacks, tight ends. Like, did you keep up with the camps, Andrew? And if you did, what are your thoughts / questions about what I saw?
I kept up a little bit. Like, I saw some of Bill Landis's posts about, just some of the offensive linemen that were there, and some of them appeared to be rather enormous for being 15, 16, 17 years old. I did see that. I was going to ask you though about Sam Greer. Do you think, and I've just seen it on the interwebs, I have no idea how valid any of it is, but is he like possibly leaning to Michigan, or is it just too soon to tell, or is it, that's all just
I don't think so. I have not really heard Michigan. I mean, he was at Missouri last week. He's been like, if it's not Ohio State eventually, I think it'll be like a Missouri or a Tennessee or so. I have not heard Michigan as a real option there, but he's an offensive lineman. Michigan plays offensive line pretty well, and I think that anyone will be looking at them. But no, I don't. That's not the team I would worry about there. What I worry about with Sam is he going to be able to stay on the field? I mean, he struggled in his first 2 seasons to be healthy. That's the biggest thing for him. But he looks the part. We've talked at length already about how the 2026 with Adam Guthrie, with Sam Greer, with Will Conroy, with Maxwell Riley, with Champ Smith down in Florida, like it should be a class that I think they probably need to take 6 offensive linemen in that class, because it should be so easy to go out and do something really big. Ohio State on Tuesday offered its first 2028 quarterback. His name is Neiman Lawrence from Miami. So this is a kid who's entering his freshman year of high school and that earned an Ohio State offer. The last quarterback that I can recall to do that was a guy named Quinn Ewers. So pretty rare company. And to me, the revelation of the week, there's two names, both of them at wide receiver, very different ends of the spectrum here, but I want to make sure I'm hit on them both. First on Tuesday was Eric McFarland, a 2028. So again, another guy going into his freshman year of high school. at the IMG Academy, originally from Las Vegas, plays for South Florida Express. He's about a 5'8", 175 pound, maybe 180 pound wide receiver. He is dynamic. Like I mean, you're talking Zachariah Branch type of dude, like very, very different. I watched as Brian Hartline talked to Eric and his mom after the camp, and Hartline basically said, "Hey, we would love for you to commit right now. Like we would love it. Commit early. Let me guide you. Let me teach you how to do this for the next 4 years." That is rare as heck. And it's definitely a guy that is worth knowing. Again, he's originally from Las Vegas, so this is not an IMG kid that's from the South or that has a predilection for any of the schools down there. It's going to be a wide open recruitment. LSU's been mentioned early, but I don't know why they haven't offered. Ohio State has. Everyone in the country is going to offer this kid, and I don't like getting worked up about someone who hasn't played a game of varsity football, but like we're talking about a real one. Like that's the real deal. Real deal.
You said he was a 2028, is that right?
2028, yeah.
2028. And then wasn't there a recent Georgia decommit as well, like maybe a 2026 or something kid that
that was Derek Cooper. Derek Cooper, a running back from Chaminade Madonna High School, so Jeremiah Smith's high school. He was at Ohio State on Thursday. Very, very good. Buckeyes will be involved in that one. The other receiver I really wanted to talk about is a kid from a town called Ontario, Ohio. Do you know where that is? You might, because of like you're into schools.
Isn't it near Mansfield?
It's near Mansfield.
Yeah.
His name is Bodpen Miller. Sorry.
Wow.
He's 6'3", 180 pounds. He 6'3", 180, and he topped out today at Ohio State over 22 miles an hour on their little machine to measure speed. Which, like, for comparison's sake, I was told on Tuesday that Jeremiah Smith ran 23.18 miles, which is the fastest that anyone at Ohio State, I think, has touched. In like Marvin Harrison a year ago was at like 22.18 on his long touchdown against Western Kentucky, and that was like everyone has 6'3", 180 pounds, running 22 miles an hour, caught everything today. Extremely like physical looking wide receiver. He's only played receiver for like 3 months. He's playing quarterback for his team because they don't have anything else. He's going to come back to Ohio State on Tuesday for the next 7-on-7 camp and get some work in with what Ohio State calls their house team, which is basically just recruits that Ohio State wants to see in competitive situations. He's a 2025 wide receiver, and this is where things get interesting. I really do. I think he's going to get an offer from Ohio State next week, and he's got one official visit set. It's this weekend to Boston College. He has a lot of offers from mid. Like it's a player that I think when I post a picture of him at some point, or I'll send you like I wish I had it to post right now, and I'm sorry I don't because that's bad podcasting. But like. He came to the United States at 6 years old from Ethiopia, was adopted. Like he's a 10-6 guy in the 100. Like he's a blazer and has no idea what he's doing out there, but he absolutely looks the part. And I don't know what that would do to the wide receiver board in the class of 2025. But I really do think that he is going to end up getting an offer from Ohio State.
So I did see some chatter earlier about that kid running an ungodly speed, but I guess for some reason in my head, I thought he was 2026. So that's interesting. So visiting Boston College, you said he will be? Yeah,
he's visiting Boston College this weekend. This is only official that he has set up.
And does he have any other offers, or is it like mostly like Mac stuff or what?
I mean, he has a lot of offers. He has, let me see here. Northwestern, Iowa State, Boston College, Miami of Ohio, Toledo, Western Michigan, Colorado State, Kent State, and Ohio. Like I think he's going to end up getting an Ohio State offer next week. And it'll be very, very interesting because again, I think Quincy Porter is in for Ohio State right now if we're playing that game. But one of the things that made Quincy Porter unique in this class is that he's the 6'3", 6'4" receiver. And Ohio State has been recruiting Vernell Brown and DeCorian Moore and Jamie French and Philip Bell, who's visiting this weekend, and Dalen McCutcheon and Talon Taylor, who committed to Georgia. So they had all these other guys that were 6'1", and now you have Bodepin Miller, who is like not normal. Like speaking of guys who are not normal, I want to go back to Emmanuel Iheanacho for a moment. At 16 years old, the number one ranked offensive tackle in the country, at 6'6", 335 pounds today, ran over 19 miles an hour. Like, jeez. I don't know that people understand how insane that is, but like when you draw them up in the lab, when you create a player on NCAA 24 next month, or like, that's the type of dude you build. And he was unbelievable today. Like, great player. But anyway, I could spend a lot of time talking about individual players, but Bodepin Miller is someone that is, I'm just putting it out there. Like, get used to the name, because I think he's going to shock everyone.
So he is obviously a speed guy. And you said he's how big did you say?
6'3", 180.
Okay, so he has like similar measurables to Quincy Porter, but when I watch,
but you still don't have those guys on the team, you know, like you.
Yeah, but that's not where I was going with it. But when I watch Quincy Porter's tape, and I texted you this earlier, when I watch Quincy Porter's huddle, I see almost like a T. Higgins type, like a high point the ball, contested catch guy. But if this other kid's running like, if he's like a 99 speed and NCAA type of guy, that's not just because he's similar measurements to Quincy Porter. I don't know if they necessarily are the same player. And I never watched this other kid's huddle, so I'm just speaking off the cuff here.
Again, I've talked to Bodepin before throughout his process, but he just decided that they're going to start playing wide receiver, and he was a revelation. And I think honestly that there was a moment on Thursday when Brian Hartline was close to just offering him right away and saying, I'll just deal with it. But I think they want to see him come back, play against some like high school defensive backs, get a little bit more competition, see how he competes at the position, see how well he goes out and fights for the football, that kind of stuff. And then you'll get a better sense of where he can be. But like, if this kid ends up at a Boston college or someone like that, it's a steal. It's a steal. Before we move on to this weekend's official visitors, let's talk about Brody Lennon, who camped at Ohio State on Thursday. He is a 2025 tight end from Cleveland. He was a player that Ohio State was looking at through the spring, and there was some discussion back then about, hey, if we want a second tight end, maybe he's a guy we can turn to. The Buckeyes at that point were fairly all in on Nate Roberts and Brock Schott, who is committed to Miami. When Brock committed to Miami, the mindset became, fine, let's just take one tight end and we'll go from there. As the summer is starting to unwind and you start to project ahead, again, maybe a little bit bigger class for Ohio State than normal, the conversation about probably need a second tight end, because you lose Will Kazmarek, you lose G. Scott after this year, you have a lot of unproven players behind those guys, and Jelani Thurman and Bennett Christian and Max LeBlanc, and maybe Demarion Witten. Like, you don't know what else you have. So it's important to make sure the roster's there. This has nothing to do with Nathan Roberts, who will take his official visit to Ohio State next weekend, the 21st, which will now be the weekend that Brody Lennon makes his official visit. And that is designed intentionally so that Nate and Brody can spend time together and get to know each other. Ohio State, and I'm just going to, you don't want to say it like this way because it puts like too much leverage on Nate Roberts or whatever. If Nate Roberts was not okay with this offer happening, it would not have happened. So I don't want to say he gave his blessing, but like he's a guy, he was asked about it and is fine with it. Brody Lennon, 6'4", 225 pounds. He's raw. I mean, he does not play at any of the major schools in Cleveland. He's a kid that is, relatively unknown. He's at the Gilmore Academy. He was thinking about Wisconsin, Kentucky, a couple of these other schools like that to go. But he's a developmental guy. 3 years down the road, maybe you see him on the field, whereas Nate Roberts is going to be counted on next year to come in and play a lot of minutes for Ohio State. So it's not one or the other. It's a both situation. And he earned it. I mean, he was really, really good on Thursday, caught everything. Big physical kid. Good route runner, better than I would have expected considering the competition he plays against. And at this point, I think you have to put him in the class. It's one of the situations where even though he's not committed anywhere, sometimes Ohio State, if they're trying to flip a kid from Kentucky or a school of that ilk, they'll basically say, we're not going to offer you if you're not committing. And I think that I don't think that was exactly how this went, but I don't think that this offer comes if Ohio State was truly concerned or worried that he was going to commit to Wisconsin or Kentucky or somewhere else.
Yeah, that sounds about right. This kid really wasn't even on my radar until you kind of put out your watch list this morning of stories you were watching today. After Brock Schott committed to Miami, I just kind of thought it was going to be a one-man tight end class, but they saw him live. Obviously, they liked him. And this kind of gives me hope that maybe they are actually anticipating that elusive 28-man class that we've all been clamoring for several cycles now.
Yeah, and London has 20 offers. Missouri's offered. Like he's got big offers. He's just sort of flown under the radar because he's not at one of the traditional Northeast Ohio powerhouses. So good player and a guy that it will certainly move up the rankings if and when he commits to Ohio State, because that's what happens. And that's what should happen. Let's be clear. If Ohio State wants a player, that player should move up in the rankings. Anything else is stupid. Like, why do we do this? Why do we play this game? Honestly, the top 175 players in the country every year should just be the players that are committed to Ohio State, Georgia. We all know that's the case in nearly every instance, except for like quarterback, because they're not all going to go to those schools.
That kind of defeats the purpose of the team rankings, though, and that chase for number one and all that. Well, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I can't. I don't make the rules. No one ever asks me my opinion. We're going to take a quick break, and when we do, we'll come back on this episode of Talking Stuff to preview the weekend's official visitors heading to Columbus starting Friday morning. We'll be right back. We're back on this episode of Talking Stuff. 11 official visitors coming to town for Ohio State this weekend. That now makes 31 through the first 3 weekends, 10 in weekend 1, 10 in weekend 2, and 11 in weekend 3. 2 official visitors who are already committed to Ohio State: offensive lineman Carter Lowe, defensive end London Merritt, who visited North Carolina last weekend, and talking to people at Ohio State this week, zero concern at all about London Merritt. That was something that he had discussed with them previous. His father has some relationships there at North Carolina, and they just wanted to get that knocked out. There is no concern. Carter will obviously be in town next weekend as well when David Sanders makes his official visit to Ohio State, but this is his time to get some celebration and make it about him. But it doesn't mean Carter's not going to have some work to do, because the Buckeyes do have Micah DeBose and Joshua Petty visiting this weekend. DeBose in Alabama, originally from the Cleveland area. Josh Petty from Georgia, Roswell. Andrew, I'm actually a believer that Ohio State has a better shot with DeBose than people are giving them credit for. I know that he was a former commitment to the University of Alabama. To Georgia. I apologize. He was committed to Georgia. He lives in Alabama. Everyone expects that he's going to end up at Auburn or somewhere in the South, but I don't. I think that there's a chance for Ohio State. I think it actually gets cemented this weekend. It's his grandmother's birthday this weekend, and their family is coming over from Cleveland to spend time in Columbus with him. And I think that that little touch of being able to spend time with your family when you're in college, it does matter. I think the Buckeyes are in a better spot there than maybe people are giving them credit for. That is interesting, because I had pretty much written that one off. I just assumed it was. I think LSU was one of the main names too, probably Auburn as well. I actually totally forgot he was even visiting this weekend until like 24 hours ago. Are they recruiting him as an interior guy? Do you know?
He's a swing guy. He can play in or out. I mean, what they're really looking for right now is 2 tackles, a swing guy, a true guard, and a center. So however they get there, that's really the goal. I think Carter Lowe could be the swing guy if you ended up with like Jackson Lloyd and David Sanders. I mean, there's a lot of ways that could move around. Like, Ohio State needs to sell all these kids on the idea that you play where you're going to get to play early. And if you can learn to play all 4, other spots other than center, or for some guys, if you can play all 5 spots, like that's better for you down the road. So Petty is interesting. I mean, he's been pretty frank about that his family was really only considering schools that his sister was going to. She's going to Florida State. Florida State is considered the favorite to land him. He was offered by Ohio State last September, but did not visit until a month ago. There was, even after that unofficial visit, there was some uncertainty if he would return for an official visit, but he is coming this weekend. So there's an interesting opportunity there. Philip Bell, the wide receiver from Mission Viejo in California, with the Talon Taylor commitment to Georgia, the guys like Philip Bell and Dalen McCutcheon really keep moving up the list of possible options for Ohio State. McCutcheon visited in week 1 with DeCorian Moore. If something goes wrong with Vernell Brown and DeCorian Moore, and you don't get either one of those, I think Philip Bell and Dalen McCutcheon will become much more important and much more worth talking about. But I think everyone knows right now that the Buckeyes are kind of waiting to see what happens with Vernell and DeCorian Moore, and then of course Jamie French, who will now decide his commitment in late August. Brings us to running back Isaiah West, Philadelphia St. Joe's Prep, former Kentucky commitment, visited Ohio State a month ago, decommitted from Kentucky 2 days after returning from Ohio State, has not visited anywhere else. Like in the world of recruiting, if there's a chance to call someone like a sure thing, like as a commitment, I think that this may be as close as we get to it. I will be shocked if he does not commit to Ohio State this weekend, or if he's not committed by like next Wednesday for sure. It would be a major surprise. There are some people in the building at Ohio State who think he might be the best running back in the country. There are not a lot of talent evaluators who have given him that opportunity to be viewed that way. Rivals.com does not even have him ranked. I don't know how that's possible. He is not getting, they don't run the ball a ton at St. Joe's Prep. He's not been a guy that's out at camps and doing a lot of those types of things. But Carlos Lachlan loves him and was recruiting him when he was at Oregon, whatever. If he's not committed by this time next week, then something went horribly wrong.
Yeah, I think all of the recent math for that one is pointing to a quick commitment, whether it's Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or whatever. And then, of course, we just have to kind of see how does that impact Jordan Davison? Do they get a third guy? But that's going to be something to watch in the weeks to come, I guess. But yeah, just biggest takeaways from these 4 names on here. I was going to tell you I see 2 total long shots in the offensive linemen, but then now you're kind of giving me some hope on Micah DeBose, so I'll watch that one. Josh Petty, I saw a picture of him and he looked like he weighs about 240. So I don't know. He looks small, but I don't know. It seems like he's going to Florida State. Philip Bell, like you said, maybe he's moving up the list a bit, but we got a lot of moving parts at wide receiver. So who knows?
Yeah, Petty, I think he's listed at like 265, but he's one of those kids who's like 6'6", 265. It's like Nick Petit Frere when he was coming out of high school. Like you look at him and you're like, okay, there's a really athletic, but a lot of work to do to get to being a ready to play offensive lineman in the Big Ten. Overall, offensive players, again, I think that there's a chance for Micah DeBose. I'm not going to say it's going to happen this weekend, but I do think that Ohio State's in a better position there than people think. On defense, this is where things get interesting because this is a 5-man group that has been kind of all over the map when it comes to Ohio State discussion. Maxwell Roy, like 2 months ago, pretty much everyone in the national recruiting complex thought he was a done deal to Ohio State or was going to end up at Ohio State. He's another St. Joe's Prep Philadelphia kid. Now all the conversation, all the crystal balls, all those things are headed to Michigan. I don't know if that's because he has not been necessarily prioritized by Larry Johnson. I don't know if it's because Ohio State sees him as somewhat interchangeable with Trajan Odom, the defensive tackle from North Carolina who visited a weekend ago. They're both 6'4". They're both 265 pounds. They both are, a future 3 tech. It's very similar. The major difference between Roy and Odom, I think, is that in the world of NIL, I think Roy would come a little bit cheaper. And that's interesting from an Ohio State perspective. He's been dealing with an ACL issue that has slowed him down quite a bit from being able to get out on the national scene. So I feel like he's the type of kid that maybe wants to lock in a spot knowing that, and like you can just focus on rehab and getting yourself in your class. The interesting thing to me is that Jim Knowles is a St. Joe's Prep guy. Okay. Like he went to St. Joe's Prep. I don't know if Larry Johnson has recruited Maxwell Roy as hard as people would have imagined. Even 8 months ago, I don't think he was. That's not the way Larry Johnson operates. So But I think Jim Knowles is more involved in this recruitment than he is in a lot of other ones. So it's worth watching from that regard. Marion Dye, Indiana, defensive tackle, 6'5", 245. I mean, his situation, I don't. It's similar in some ways to Damian Shanklin, and I talked to people about it on Thursday at Ohio State, and they're like, we just don't know what his priorities are, and so they're going to find that out this weekend. If you want to read the quote that you saw from his uncle Andrew, do you just want to pull that up?
Oh gosh, yeah,
because it does give us it does give I think a little insight into how these schools are forced to deal with recruits right now, because everybody has a different priority and it's not always clear what it is. So can you just find it?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, and with him, I still don't know. Like, I still can't find like actual measurements on his height and weight, so I have no idea. If he's 230 pounds now, he's probably going to play defensive end. If he's 265 pounds now, he's probably going to be defensive tackle. So, anyway, yeah, this quote is from after the visit to Michigan. This is a quote from On3. Ann Arbor is all right. I got an arrogant type feel to it, but it's Michigan. They got a rich culture there. They got the most wins in college football, so it's probably not arrogant. I felt a lot of confidence around there. But then we get to the meat and potatoes of his quote. We have our plan. They have their plan. And we want to bring those plans together. So we're just waiting on them to get back with us, whether they agree with our plan and whether we agree with their plans. So it's one of those kind of like read between the lines type of things after you read that.
Now, I'm no expert. I'm not a lawyer. But to me, that sounds like we have an NIL number we're trying to get to. They have something that they're willing to pay us, and we're trying to see where we can align. For a player that has been relatively quiet on the recruiting radar, I've heard that the Dye camp is asking for a little bit more money than maybe they're being valued at the Big Ten schools. So we'll see if that means anything for Ohio State this weekend. I really don't know how to read this one. I mean, I'm not going to BS people. I don't know how to read it. I know that he's excited to get to town. He told me he was, but again, I also think that there are a number of people / families / uncles, whatever, who think Ohio State is an open piggy bank and that they're just going to, but that's not the case. Like, yes, Ohio State is doing fine in NIL. Yes, they've been aggressive, but they're not being stupid, and they're not just spending exorbitant amounts on every single player. So that's where I think there may be some cross up.
But I think there's probably lots of families, and if I were in that situation, my family would be having these conversations too, talking about those types of things. But it's when you go and you give a quote like that to a reporter, it makes it kind of extra spicy, I guess.
Yeah. Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng, he is the younger brother of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, the linebacker for the Cleveland Browns, who played at Notre Dame. He visited Notre Dame last weekend. Everyone expects Notre Dame to be the team to beat. I think Ohio State's got a shot. We'll see here. Notre Dame will also likely be landing Madden Faramo, linebacker from California, in the near future. Well, he was originally on the official visit list this weekend for the Buckeyes, but the Buckeyes canceled that trip just because they think that right now Faramo and Eli Lee are pretty similar players, and they're looking for outside linebackers, not inside linebackers, which is where Owusu-Boateng comes in. He's originally from Virginia, plays at IMG Academy, twitched up, 6'2", 210-pounder, similar in style to both TJ Alford and Riley Pettijohn, who is really the top target with Owusu-Boateng at the outside linebacker spot. Bless you.
Thank you.
Brandon Finney, who is a corner from Maryland, he was offered on May 20th, making his official visit this weekend. Not a lot to say about him. Ohio State does not bring in kids for an official visit if they're not serious about them. So let's just be clear. Like, they think that this kid can play. He's just really seeming to get started in his recruiting process, and he made it a point to schedule an Ohio State visit as soon as he got offered. So it's a name to watch, but I'm not going to say that much about it because at cornerback, you have Devin Sanchez, you have Naeem Offord, and the Dorian Brew official visit looms pretty large for next weekend. And then at safety, Messiah Delhomme from Virginia. Again, mentioned earlier in the top of the show, Ohio State has 3. They'd like probably 4. I don't think you have to worry about a commitment this weekend from Delhomme, but I do think that he's the most likely 4th safety in the class as the official visit season wraps up. That's an Ohio State, Maryland, Virginia Tech, Virginia battle right now. And if you're comparing those schools, if Ohio State wants him and they really push for him, I think that they will get him. But he told me like a month ago that one of the biggest surprises in his recruiting process was the consistency and volume of conversations he's had with McArary. So clearly the Buckeyes like him. He's coming in this weekend for a reason. But again, you will not see Ohio State like push all in for a commitment this weekend. They would like, I think, to get through this month and see how things shake out before firmly moving in on a 4th safety. But as I've talked about before, I do not believe Trey McNutt will end up in the Ohio State class. And I think that Messiah Delhomme is much more likely to be that 4th safety. And those are the 11 official visitors for the weekend. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back, talk about a few other things on this episode of Talking Stuff, and get it wrapped up for you. So Andrew Ellis and myself, Jeremy Birmingham, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Talking Stuff, the Ohio State Recruiting Podcast on the podcast. He's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. Naeem Offord. Andrew, this is one. He's visited Alabama for 4 of the last 9 days, and that is certainly concerning. He's heading to Oregon this weekend. That's also concerning. I think, and I'm going to sound like I'm playing both sides of the argument here. I think there's 2 ways you can really look at this if you're Ohio State. Number one, he's been honest with them. They know everything he's doing. There's no lack of conversation. Tim Walton and his family and the Offords have not stopped communicating. There has not been anything sneaky. And then there's the other side of it, which is to say, this sort of feels like it's going to end with him ending up in Alabama, right? So why not just, if you're Ohio State, why not cut your losses and start going harder after Brandon Finney and making sure Dorian Brew understands what's on, in front of the situation here. Like I think I can see both sides. I'm certainly of the mindset right now, and I think it's worth underlining that it's because Ohio State feels this way. They are not worried about Naeem Offord. But in recruiting, one of those old adages, watch what they do, not what they say, like what has been doing in the last 10 days for Naeem Offord, it feels concerning.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit, but I don't know. I feel like if he's communicating these things with the staff, is it really that big of a deal? That I don't know how far he lives from Tuscaloosa, but it's obviously.
Yeah, how far is Birmingham from Tuscaloosa? I don't know. But either way, he's close to there. It's less than an hour.
Yeah. So, I mean, would you prefer him not to be there every other day, seemingly? Sure.
You're right.
But I don't know. Like, I like that he's coming back for that huge weekend at Ohio State next weekend. I don't care about tweets with him with Alabama gloves on, even though I'll send those tweets to you via text message every time I see them. But I don't know. I don't feel like this is panic mode or anything. Like 2 weeks ago, people were talking about Oregon being the top competition, and now he's been in Alabama a lot. So now it's Bama being the top competition, which makes more sense given the proximity. But I don't know. I'm at like a 3.76 on the panic meter, I guess.
Yeah. The biggest concern I personally would have is that in a first recruiting cycle for Kalen DeBoer and his new coaching staff at Alabama, knowing that Ohio State is also very aggressively going after Malik Autry and Zion Grady, the defensive lineman from Alabama. Like, I think Kalen DeBoer is going to have to go to extreme lengths to make sure that the best players in Alabama don't go leaving the state on his first recruiting cycle with the Crimson Tide. Like, that is where you worry that maybe there's more things at play here than even just, NIL as far as what's acceptable and legal. That said, again, Tim Walton does not seem to have concerns based on everything that we've seen. We saw I think Naeem Offord on social media like intentionally in the last day or so was tweeting stuff about Devin Sanchez and how close they are. The weekend at Ohio State next weekend is pretty important because after this official visit stuff wraps up, there's going to be a couple months of downtime where these kids are going to be just going back to their teams. And to be clear, he camped at Alabama just because he wants to compete. And then he was there in a 7-on-7 camp with Alabama. Yes, he wore Alabama gloves at the 7-on-7 camp. I'm going to tell you right now, if a player, I don't know, find me a player in Ohio. If Ryan Montgomery, for example, who is firmly committed to Georgia, right, showed up at Ohio State just to get some work in with his team, a player that Ohio State and the coaching staff has great relationships with, a player that like they would not let him walk around. They would probably try to convince him, hey, take that Georgia crap off. Like, you're at Ohio State. Your brother plays here. Like, you don't need to do that. So I don't think the Alabama staff would have like let him wear Ohio State gloves even if he wanted to. I don't know for sure what's in his mind. I have not talked to him about this stuff, but I do think it's important to understand that he lives an hour away from Tuscaloosa. But after we get through the month of June, he won't be back there probably for another 5 months. And if Alabama goes out this season, and we have no idea how good they're going to be, if they go out there and they lose 3 or 4 games, this may all be moot because Kalen DeBoer does not have the support and like adoration of the Alabama high school football coaches. So they are all on wait and see mode with him. And I think it's great on his part and smart on his part to put on the full court press right now, but none of that really matters. And I'm not saying that Ohio State won't have any more hiccups here, but the hiccups you really have to worry about are going to come in like November. So don't worry about it now because he's still coming to Ohio State next weekend. He'll be in multiple games this season, et cetera. He is, as I said, visiting Oregon this week. He's not the only Ohio State target / commit visiting elsewhere. Andrew, what are your biggest concerns this weekend as Ohio State targets like Justin Hill, Trey McNutt, and others hit the road?
Well, DeCorian Moore is visiting Texas. I think, people talk about Oregon a lot too, but I feel like it's probably going to come down to Ohio State and Texas. I know some people have told you they feel it's going to come down to Ohio State and Oregon, but that's a big visit. So that's certainly going to be one to watch.
Right. Riley Pettijohn will also be at Texas this weekend.
Yep, Riley Pettijohn too. Also, I guess Justin Hill, I think we both feel he's going to end up at Ohio State, although I love the optimism coming out of every single big weekend. Last Sunday, there were rumors that he was going to commit to USC. Obviously, that didn't happen. But early on, we had talked about Alabama being a serious option for him. Then Nick Saban left. So him getting back there, I guess we'll see how that goes. And then, David Sanders. So I think the general thought is Ohio State and Tennessee are at the top of the list for David Sanders. He's visiting Tennessee this weekend. Then next week, he's taking a midweek trip to Alabama. So those are ones to watch. I don't think Dorian Brew was expected at Oregon this weekend, but now he's supposed to be there. I don't know. There's actually a lot of big ones to watch around the country this weekend.
Yeah, we've also talked before, like Ohio State is in a position where they like the David Sanders thing is obviously the most important one because I do think Tennessee is the team to really worry about there. I think if Ohio State can get through this weekend and they get the final shot at David Sanders, I think that's great for them. Trey McNutt, is he going to A&M this weekend or where's he going?
Yeah, last I saw it was A&M. He was at Florida last weekend.
Yeah, I don't see that happening for Ohio State, so I wouldn't have that one on like a big concern list. Jordan Davison at Oregon is a key official visit this weekend. That is, especially if Isaiah West commits to Ohio State, like while the weekend is ongoing, that will make things very easy for the Oregon staff to try to drive a wedge there, even though I'm confident that Jordan Davison is fully aware of Ohio State's plans at running back. It's still something that you have to worry about. So I think the Riley Pettijohn one to Texas is interesting. I've heard that there has not been a ton of communication between Pettijohn and Texas in the last 2 weeks, and maybe that's just the Longhorn staff like being I don't want to say complacent, but maybe being a little bit presumptuous. Like he's coming here, we'll just turn up the heat when he gets on campus and it won't matter. the relationship between the Pettijohns and Ohio State remains very, very strong. And I don't know. I just think that there's like I think there's like a 43% chance of a coup there for Ohio State. It's closer than people think. But as you go in this weekend, like Dorian Brew going out to Oregon, that's always interesting. These kids are just going everywhere. They're kids. They visit so many places. The places you'll see. The things you'll do. It's a wonderful time to be a recruit. You get to see and do everything and anywhere. And it's not always fun. Not always fun. Let's go to the 4-minute offense and wrap up this episode of Talking Stuff. Andrew, what's on your mind?
One other big visitor that we actually did not talk about on that last section there, but Vernell Brown. So touching on him again, it seems like every recruiting person in the industry says it's going to be Florida, Florida State, or Miami. He's visiting Florida this weekend. Obviously, he's a Florida legacy. We've talked about that multiple times. You're essentially the only person left in the industry in America that still has him maybe going to Ohio State. So I think
it's Ohio State and Florida. I think those are the only two real teams in this fight. So that's what I think. I know that there has been a ton of conversation about Florida State and Miami in the last couple of weeks. I think it's Ohio State or Florida. It's, do I want to go to Ohio State? Do all the things Ohio State has to offer wide receivers, or do I want to stay home, follow my father's footsteps, stay in the legacy? Obviously, Florida is going to go to great degrees to make sure that he does not leave the state. Brian Hartline has been able to win in those circumstances before, like with Jeremiah Smith, for example. But we'll see. I think that this weekend's visit to Florida is the big one for Vernell Brown. I do not, and maybe I'll end up eating my words. I just don't think Miami or Florida State are a real threat there. I think it's Ohio State or Florida. But
okay,
I know that there are people at Ohio State, and not just coaching staff, but like recruits who firmly believe that he will end up in Columbus. So we'll see. Now, kids think that everyone's going to end up in Columbus, so that's generally the way it goes. But I don't put much stock into the Florida State and Miami stuff. Florida, I do, because of all the other reasons, the family reasons.
Gotcha. Two more recruits I wanted to just quickly ask you about. Then I kind of have a random question for you. Jordan Davison, we talked about him visiting Oregon this weekend. There were some positive quotes, although he was questioning where those quotes came from one of the Michigan outlets as far as how his visit to Michigan went. We would still say Ohio State and Oregon are the two teams there. Assuming things go as planned this weekend and Carlos Loughlin does land Isaiah West, do you think that's going to totally change the trajectory of this Davison recruitment? I mean, I guess I would say coming right now, as we sit here on Thursday, you would have him to Ohio State. But if Ohio State does as we expect and lands Isaiah West, is that going to completely change that?
I don't think so. And I'll just go so far as say, if he visits Ohio State, I think he ends up at Ohio State. Like, so if something dramatic happens and Isaiah West commits and he says, you know what, screw it, I'm not even going to visit there, then we know. But if Jordan Davison has been fairly clear with his intentions for the last few months, he has done exactly to this point what he said he's going to do. Part of that plan is to make that visit to Ohio State on June 21st. If he makes that visit to Ohio State on June 21st, I would be surprised if he ends up anywhere else.
Cool.
So we'll know. I think you'll know about what his ultimate intentions are by midweek,
Cool. Got it. This is for the 2026 class. So obviously Tavian St. Clair's in the fold for 2025, firmly committed.
We still don't have any answers. We don't know what's happening at quarterback. Yes, Diabell did a great job at Ohio State on Tuesday. He's been there like 6 times. Brady Palmer from California did a nice job. Monday is a big day. They're going to have a lot of quarterbacks in the class of 2026 on campus on Monday. We're going to have a much clearer picture by this time next week. Now, does that mean that they're going to have a true pecking order? I don't think so, because they're not really in a hurry. To be honest, they can take their time. We are seeing other 2026 quarterbacks come off the board. We saw, what's the kid in Florida at Cocoa, whose name is escaping me right now?
Hart, is it Hart? I can't remember.
Brady Hart, another
Hart. Yeah,
Brady. Brady. Every quarterback's name is Brady.
Was it Grubbs? Was there a Grubbs kid? That
Noah Grubbs committed. Noah Grubbs committed to Notre Dame. Brady Hart from Cocoa visited Clemson last week. He's supposed to visit Ohio State this coming week. We'll see if he makes the trip. He got offered by Clemson. Crystal ball is coming in for Clemson on him. I think Diabell is probably the one that, like, if I was forced to pick one today in the class of 2026, I would probably pick Diabell. He's been to Ohio State, as I said, like 6 times. I know that there's a lot of talk about Texas. I know there's a lot of talk about Penn State, but Texas, I think, will end up with Troy Hoon from California. And I think that maybe could happen soon, which would remove them from the Diabell sweepstakes. I think Diabell is the guy I would have penciled in right now, but
yeah,
there's big questions.
We didn't even rehearse this question, and you went way deeper than I was going to have you go. I was just going to simply ask about Diabell because I was going to say this was going to be his. He was there this week, and it was like his 6th visit to campus. But all I keep seeing is Texas and Penn State talk about him. So I just thought that wasn't really adding up.
Now, the Troy Hoon decision, which I think could come soon for the Longhorns, that could really be a domino that has some impact here for Ohio State. So I don't know that they really know what they want to do yet. And that's based on watching Chip Kelly and Ryan Day and Riley Larkin evaluate guys in the last 2 weeks. So Monday will be a big day for that. I would, if I was, again, prognosticating, I would circle Diabell and say this is the most likely because I know he loves it, Ohio State. I know that from talking to his father, Rajabell, on Tuesday a little bit, like it seemed like they really are interested in being at a place with quarterback development history and with a chance to win a national championship. So, and this is not to knock Penn State, but I don't know that Penn State fits the bill for either one of those.
Yeah, that sounds right. Okay, last thing. Remind me, what was the speed that you said Jeremiah Smith clocked in with the fancy ass, whatever contraption he was wearing?
23.18.
Okay, this is my question. So obviously we are both teenagers, so we are going to be buying NCAA 2025. I know I've pre-ordered. I don't know if you have. What is your prediction on Jeremiah Smith's overall rating and speed rating for that game?
I think he will be a 90 overall as a true freshman.
No way.
And is that too low?
I mean, I just remember back in the day, like it was hard for a true freshman to come in and be like even an 80. But that was that was not long ago. Maybe it's changed.
I think he'll be a 90 overall, and I think he'll have a 96 in speed at 6'3" and 218 pounds.
I can get in line with the speed. I don't think they'll rate him that high overall, although I wouldn't have a problem with it.
But if they don't, everyone in the country should edit their roster because he's a freak.
Can't do that. Can't edit your players' ratings.
What?
That's a big thing that came out. Can't. Yep.
Oh, no.
The only thing I care about is like, can you still put the colored like tape over their feet or whatever? Because I used to put like all of my star players with like the scarlet tape and stuff.
Yeah.
And the visors, obviously. So we'll see.
It's gonna be fun. Can't wait. We have today's the 13th of June. There's 1 month and 6 days until
my niece and her boyfriend are going to Ohio University where I went, but they gifted me a PS5. So we have one now. So I haven't hooked it up yet, but I can't wait. All
Congrats.
set.
You have, I mean, first thing you do when you move into the new house, I guess. That's where I know it's time to wrap up talking stuff because we could talk about video games for a while. But he's Andrew Ellis. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening. Please rate, review, subscribe, leave a comment, and let us know if you like the show. Sorry if you didn't have a good weekend. If you're a father out there, happy Father's Day. If you have a father, make sure that you spend some good time with him. And for those of you out there who are fighting the good fight as a single parent, thanks. You're doing great also. We'll talk to you later. Goodbye.